Hello, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are interested in the state of the dungeon. Here in the Dungeon of Love, we had an interesting night. Interesting's a good word. This is 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. The campaign is Princes of the Apocalypse. Not all players were in attendance. We were missing the player of Donlud and the player of Brock. So we were missing the Warlock Barbarian and the Gnome Wizard, respectively. That's a lot of firepower usually to lose, so how did they handle it? Let's get into it. When last we had played, the group had discovered the Dwarven Prince who had been kidnapped while on pilgrimage. This was actually the end goal for what the original group setting along this path was tasked to do. Since that time, we've had one TPK. This group actually started from the opposite end of the valley and moved up and encountered the cult and all the horribleness, and they finally found the prince who the first group was trying to locate. So, just to put some perspective into things, that's kind of how far things went. Had the original group survived all the way, this was the point where they would have found the prince. Obviously, they would have been tied in with dealing with the cult, but one thing could have been ticked off their list. They were supposed to find the prince. They were supposed to find the prince's axe if they could. It's a relic. And, you know, save whoever they could. And so far, they saved the caravan master, and they saved the sage who was with them. All told, that's pretty much as they could have done, realistically. There were a few that died, you know, just because it took them a while to get there, but, you know, they died in the mines or they died as sacrifices, so not much you could do there. So when the group got the prince out of the chimney, and the two merchants who were with him, that triggered an encounter. 4 of the skulls that were in the room of radiant light that were inset all along the walls with skulls with different colored flames inside of them. 4 of them were actually flame skulls, which are an undead creature made from actual dead wizards. And they are actual skulls that fly around. They can fly. They can cast spells, and they still maintain a vestige of their intelligence to the point where they can be pretty damn nasty, recognizing threats and identifying vulnerabilities and being able to use their magics. They quickly realized that many of the group had flame resistance. Their default attack is to send out jets of flame, and they realized that wasn't going to do a great deal, although they end up falling on that when they started using up some of their other spells. So instead they tried using, well, first of all they identified the rogue, Auric, and they peppered him with magic missiles repeatedly. He got kind of tired of that. They used a variety of abilities, but really they held short on throwing down fireballs until the midpoint. They didn't recognize the monk was experienced enough that she had evasion, so they tried fireballing her. Of course, her and Auric laughed, but the others kind of had some issues. They took some damage, but for the most part, flame skulls are kind of tough, but after a couple of their defensive spells and most of their offense is used up, the group chopped them down without too great of difficulty. The major problems were that they could fly, which meant that Auric with his swords should have had some problems. The little sucker can jump, or he can pull out his dwarven hammer of throwing, which comes back to him. So he disabused the flame skulls of the idea that just because they were out of his short sword range meant they were safe. They weren't. Also, Oriana was effective. She was able to hit a few times and do some real damage. But by and large, Antaeus the Paladin, with Wonderbreaker, if he was able to get a hit on the skulls, if he could unload with both of his attacks, he was able to do enough damage to pretty much drop an already injured Flame Skull, or severely injure one that wasn't in bad shape. So they finally got through them. The prince got zinged a couple of times as he escorted the merchants out of the room, so he's already kind of roughed up. By the time everything is done, Prince comes back. They give him a healing potion to try to, freshen up a little bit. He asks for a weapon. They give him the Bronzium Warhammer that they got earlier on in the adventure. It's a good stout dwarven weapon, and he appreciated it because he's a warrior. He's a fighter. He's good with those kind of weapons. And they got him some, I believe, leather armor, which better than nothing. He's willing to face death as long as he's got armor and a weapon. So, but they didn't really put him into a great deal of danger because he just wasn't equipped. Had he had his normal arms and armor, he might have been a different story. Especially if he'd had his relic axe, he would have had a lot of fun. But after they settled the Flame Skulls, there was a whoosh, and a bunch of ravens came flying into the room, and they swirled around and they picked up all of the bits of Flame Skull and picked them all up, and it kind of brought it into the center of this cloud of swirling ravens, and a bone statuette of the Raven Queen was left behind. It took them a few moments before they realized it was the Raven Queen. And she said, "Oh, you're here in a node, which is hard for me to reach. But since you destroyed these undead, intelligent undead at that, you gave me the power that I could come in here and give you a gift. Don't blame me, I'm not the one who made it difficult to get him." She gave them an egg, and then she vanished. The egg started twitching, they put it on the floor, crack, out comes Terran, fully armed in armor. Terran, of course, was the fighter, formerly a fighter of Hieronius, who had a change of heart and sought the aid of the Raven Queen to become a warlock of the Hexblade variety. So he himself is already a very competent warrior. He does like having the versatility of being able to throw out the Eldritch Blasts, but if he get into hand-to-hand with his glaive weapon that his Lucerne Hammer, he is just a whirlwind of destruction as a accomplished battlemaster fighter. So he definitely gave the group the firepower to not terribly miss Brock and Donlud quite as much. It's just kind of how it was. They also, the Tinderstrike, who had been something that Donlud had been carrying, was now carried by Geth, who fortunately was able to make it for the session. So they go along a series of bridges that span across this large lake below, and they see that there's a bunch of salamanders and fire snakes in this large fire pit. They figure out how to get across, mostly with a darkness spell dropped down on the salamanders and then scooting on through the room. The group got through without taking any damage, and in fact, when one of them threw up a spear, Oriana volunteered to take point, because when that spear came up, she grabbed it, turned it, and sent it right back down and plunged it into the salamander who threw it. It was quite good, even though she got a little bit scalded from the heat. It's still something it didn't want to do again. So they got through relatively unscathed. That took them into the Temple of Fire, with an actual altar. There were a couple of flame priests and a flame rack. This is a warrior of the flame cult who actually had his heart removed. If you're thinking Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, you're on the right pace. But instead, fire is inset into their chest, and it's kept open so you can still see the fire. Basically, their soul at that point has been given over to Imix, the Prince of Fire, so they are fairly strong warriors after that. They're bonded into a suit of splint mail armor, which gives them good protection. They're given spears that they can ignite with fire. If they die, they explode and their armor turns into shrapnel, so they're pretty nasty. So there was one of those and a couple of the flame priests. Oriana moved in, as she is a mage slayer, she has that feat. She was not the person that the priests wanted around. The group moved up because they wanted to try to drop the flame rack before he could hurt everybody else. So to that end, Auric came up and tried to assassinate him. That didn't quite work. So Antaeus moved up to engage him as well, while Terran stayed back and fired Eldritch Blasts where he could, trying to stay out of range of any real danger. Tactically, it worked out fairly well, although his armor class did allow him to weather quite a bit of a fight. He just really didn't get to wreak a great deal of harm. I was having a really off night dice rolling. The priests themselves didn't stand much of a chance. Terran came over and just mowed through, and Oriana was delivering a relentless stream of kicks, punches, headbutts, what have you, which was causing them some real difficulty. All told, everybody was pretty effective in this fight. The flame cultists were not as prepared as they probably should have been. In hindsight, I probably should have let them buff up a bit before the fight, but quite honestly, they're kind of dispirited after it's pretty clear that the one who won the race was Old Hydra, and they're just kind of trying to cling to whatever they can. So then there were two alcoves, one on either side, and they looted, because of course they are. One of them was the bedroom of the Ifrit, and one of the flame priests actually had a key to the chest. It was kept in his possession by the Ifrit, basically entrusted it to him. And they found some treasure in there. Nothing all-inspiring, a potion, I believe, a few odds and ends, and a fair amount of money, because, you know, money hasn't exactly been falling out of the sky for them. They also, in the opposite room, found, well, what had been, while she was still alive, the Fire Prophetess's room. Now, this place had been sacked. They knew she was dead, so they took all of her potent magical items, but they found her wardrobe, which was rich, and they could sell the clothes for quite a bit if they want to. They did find one remaining potion that was left in a pocket, so they've got that, although they haven't identified it yet. I believe Brock is the one who has the know-how, who can identify potions fairly reliably, so maybe when he shows up they'll let him take a look. So beyond those chambers, the passage into the fire portal. They went in. What do they see? There's the whole room. The bottom is a lava lake. Lava is flowing into it from the higher rooms. There's a walkway to an altar on a flat surface. Beyond that is a massive stone titan rising out of the lava, up to his waist. His head is arched back, and lava is pouring out of his eyes and his mouth. He's got an expression frozen on his face of perpetual agony. Directly above him, like a small star, is a large flaming sphere. The portal. And they could feel the malevolence of Imix radiating through. Now, the prophetess had gathered quite a bit of power. She was one of the most arcane thinkers of the group, and she knew that a stockpile of magical power would be necessary to open up the gate enough that Imix could come through. So she had been on that longer than any of the others. The others had various their other takes on it. So Imix was aware of the portal, and as soon as the group went in, he was aware of the danger to the portal because they had Tinder Strike, which was the weapon that could close it. However, it was not unguarded, because on that little island in the middle of the lava was a large red dragon. That's right, one of the nastiest creatures in the D&D game was right there to guard it. The group was understaffed, and the thing called right out to them. Took you long enough. Well, I've known about you, and I knew you were coming at some point. I didn't know if I'd be the one who'd get to kill all of you or not, but it really doesn't matter. Because if you want to come down here, you have to get through me, and I'll make sure none of you survive it. The group looked him up. They tried to, identify how old he was. He was a full adult red dragon. Very nasty. They knew that this was going to test everything they were able to do. And they were down their wizard and their warlock. What could go wrong? So they immediately started thinking out tacticals. You could hear some of them, you know, going through what do they have to deal with dragons. And Geth went forward and said, okay, you know that the fire cult is done. You know that the prophet is deceased. Why stay? The dragon's response was, well, I look at it this way. If the world gets destroyed by Hydra, I jump through that portal there. I could do just fine in the elemental chaos of fire. I'll be a player over there. That's not optimal because I can't bring my treasure with me, but I can survive. I'll get through this. If the heroes can drive off Hydra, and I've still got this portal here, I've got a direct link up to incredible power, and I can found a cult based on me. I won't be the new prophet of fire necessarily, because, yeah, that's putting all your eggs in somebody else's basket, somebody bigger than me, and that's not what I do. But we'll start small, I'll get followers, and eventually I'll be a power all of my own. But I won't be trying to destroy the world, so I'm better, right? And Geth said, well, how about this? You know who we are. How about I agree to serve you? I'll bring you treasure. I'll go out into the world in a way that you can't. Make sure that your will gets done. I'll keep bringing you treasure. And in exchange, you let us destroy that portal and you help us against Hydra. Dragon actually had to think about that one. He said, he eventually came up with a counteroffer. He's like, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll let you destroy the portal, and I'll even agree to help you. But I need all of your group to agree to work for me. You do that, and we have a deal. You'll get what you want, I'll get something myself, everybody prospers. And you'll walk out of here without a fight. You'll have the advantage of me helping you out. It's a win for you, it's a win for me. Well, that grated on them quite a bit. Also important was that Geth had cast a detect magic spell earlier to try to identify any magic that was in Vanifer's goods when they were looting them. So he took a real close look at the dragon as he approached him, and he noticed that the dragon was radiating magic. Just thick with it. Illusionary magic. They immediately go, he's full of illusionary magic, you know that. And they're like, yeah, well, how about... And they attacked. Interesting thing on the attack, turns out it was a dragon. Just not nearly as big. He was actually a young dragon who was pretending to be an older dragon to try to awe the group. As it was still a pretty good fight. Also, he had hidden some resources. He had a flame myrmidon, which is kind of a nasty creature. It's a flame elemental stuck into a suit of armor with a pair of scimitars. On the one hand, it's not as malleable as a fire elemental. To the plus side, it's got much better armor class. Its scimitars can be kind of nasty. The group had a pretty good fight. So first of all, the group moves up and they attack the dragon. I had the large adult dragon, and it worked down to this dragon, who is still, you know, a bit bigger than the group is. By the way, this, I think, got a target for less than $5. You can get miniatures on the cheap if you know where to look. No, I take this back. I got this from my hobby shop for like $5. But still very cool and not that expensive. You don't have to go and spend $50 on the latest Wizards of the Coast dragon miniatures to still have pretty fine figures. So the group moves up and they attack the dragon. A number of attacks get bounced off. It's a dragon. But they do hit it pretty hard. And as the damage mounts up, it gets to about a quarter of its damage, and he's like, you know what? Screw all of you. I don't have to deal with this. And it goes, blook, and goes into the lava. The group's like, oh crap. We don't get to have our big fight. Because he ran away. Screw it, we'll destroy the portal. Everybody get back. Who's going to destroy the portal? Antea said, I've got the swan helm. I can grow wings, I can fly. I can destroy the portal. Okay, here's Tinder Strike, go destroy the portal. So he moves up while everybody else backs up because they remember that when the portal closed for the Earth realm, it was a little robust, to say the least. So he goes up and he takes Tinder Strike and he stabs the altar on the island of rock. And nothing happens. It knocks a little chunk out. Nothing. Okay. So, takes the dagger, takes a look at that Titan. Flies up there, up to the top of the Titan. And kind of like, if you've played or seen Shadows of the Colossus, he went up with that dagger and he was going to plant it right in its forehead. Only to meet the dragon who had climbed up on the other side and tackled him. Just yard sailed him. Trying to get the dagger from him. It wanted Tinder Strike for its own. So they had a fight up there while all the rest of the group was cut off. They were a ways away. And this is when the Fire Myrmidon came up. Which meant now the party had kind of two fronts. For the most part, they could fire up and keep attacking and try to help out Antaeus. But for people like, say, Terran, his offense at range was not nearly as impressive as his melee. Same thing goes with, Auric, Oriana. Her long-range attack is only her water whip. That's all she's got. Geth, on the other hand, he was too much Antaeus in the way for him to lightning bolt effectively. So he was continuing to throw out spells. The thing that drove the dragon down for the most part was when Geth summoned his Storm Sphere, his level 4 lightning attack spell, right on the back of the dragon. The dragon's like, screw it. I'm not dealing with this. That's when he went into the lava. So Geth dismissed it. There was no reason to have it anymore. The dragon took off. And now he had used that spell when the dragon made its reappearance. So there was quite a bit of fighting left to do. The dragon breathed on Antaeus, who it turned out did not have fire breathing or fire resistance anymore. His fire resistance was as a basis of a spell, which had lapsed. So he rolled with the punch, but he took a respectable amount of damage from the breath weapon. The rest of the group continued chipping away, beating on it some more. But there were pretty big gouges, to be fair. And when Antaeus pulled out Wonderbreaker and broke the dragon's wing, he called shot and nailed it hard. He then flew up from the dragon, and Tinder Strike had fallen. They had been contesting for it, and it had fallen into the lava. He went down and grabbed it, and was flying up to get away from the dragon. The dragon climbed up, and they can climb very well, climbed up the stone titan, and leapt to try to get at it. It didn't work. That just didn't work. He couldn't get a hold of Antaeus. And after he got racked some more, and he took enough damage just about to kill him, he was in single digits. He realized he wasn't going to win. If he stayed there, he was going to die, and it was a certainty. So he climbed to the top of the stone Colossus, and he jumped straight up and went into the fire portal. Pop! Now, He is a very vulnerable dragon, and there's an angry Prince Imix right there. So who knows how the dragon's going to end up? The group probably won't find out. But the dragon will be very sorry that things turned out the way it did. But that's the price of ambition, isn't it? The group also finished off the Fire Myrmidon. Since it was down on the ground, it was perfect for being mulched by the big melee types, especially I know a large chunk of the damage came from Oriana and Terran. Did quite a bit for it. Ironically, Geth didn't get to throw out, I don't believe, a single lightning bolt, which had kind of been his thing. But he was still effective peppering things with his various magics. So that worked out really well. The group was effective enough that I believe they all stayed fairly far away from death, with the exception, of course, of Antaeus, who took a beating and actually did fall in the lava once. He also took the breath weapon, and through it all he had, I think by the time he told me, he had like 9 hit points left. It was a tense situation for him. But the rest of the group did alright for the most part. The ones who needed to stay out of the fight were able to stay out of the fight. The ones who shine in melee got to shine quite a bit. And the group successfully won, earned their 2,500 experience points. Finally, Antaeus flew above the sphere that was the portal and dropped Tinder Strike down onto it. Point first. The portal expanded, shrunk down to a point, and sucked all the summoned fire elementals into itself, no matter where they were. So you had elementals that were being dragged from various points in the valley in some cases, flying almost instantaneously all the way back down under the ground and into the portal. All the works of Vanifer, all of her elementals that she had summoned, and all the other fire creatures that were native to the plane of elemental fire, gone. But this place didn't crack, crumble, or fall apart. It's just cooling off to much more comfortable levels. So, there's still a trickle of lava, but it's not radiating out nearly as much heat. They've killed, I believe, every single fire cultist at this point, except for the ones that are in the Fane of the Eye. So the fire cult is now completely and truly dead, and Imix has now no way into the material plane through this world. So the group did exactly what they had set out to do. There were heroics all around. It was a very physical fight, but one in which a very skilled group of players was able to take a very tough opponent to task by using all the resources at their disposal. So, yeah, it was a well-fought fight and a good capstone to that chunk of the adventure. Now, however, the group has no elemental weapons. One of the elemental weapons that they would like to get is in the possession of their enemy, so closing the air sphere may be difficult for them. They're going to have to regroup, pop back over to Mordenkainen and company, and try to come up with another strategy. So, yes, there's plenty more to do in this campaign, but we will get to that in future sessions. Thank you for joining me, and again, this was the session on the 25th of July, so we are starting to run close to the end of this campaign. Thank you, and I'll see you next time for another State of the Dungeon. Farewell.